A refreshing tea break. Let's kickstart the panel discussion on ethics in the digital age, navigating digital age challenges with dark patterns, influencer dynamics, and responsible advertising. Please join me in welcoming on the stage a session moderator, Mr. Joao Flores, Regional Executive Creative Director, APAC Media Monks. Can we all please welcome Mr. Flores on stage? A very warm welcome to you. Joining him are key panelists, Mr. Shubhajit Sen, founding partner at A Priori Consultants. Let's all welcome Mr. Sen on stage. A hearty welcome to you, sir. Mr. Amit Khurana, Head of Branding and Advertising, Capgemini India. A hearty welcome to you, sir. Kindly keep the applause going, ladies and gentlemen. We just had tea. I think there's a lot of more energy in us to applaud a little better. We also have with us Ms. Tanu Banerjee, Partner, Media and Technology, Khaitan and Company. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am. And I now hand over the session to Honorable Moderator, Mr. Flores, for further proceedings.
Good morning. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Before I introduce the panel, I'm the foreigner in the room, I believe. My name is João Flores. I'm the ECD of Media Monks, so Ms. Puneet actually just showed all of our work with Tata Tea, so thank you for that. That was the portfolio right there. Very excited to be here with my fellow colleagues. We're going to start talking about a very heavy panel. So when we were going through the process of preparing for this conference, we actually understood that the topic itself has three different ways of experience creative technology and technology. The first one, of course, is navigating digital age dark patterns. So we'll go through that first topic. Immediately after, we go through the topic of new ecosystems, you know, power, celebrity versus the power of a product. And then finally, we'll go through the topic of new legacies with the responsible advertising. This is how we're going to set up the session. On my left, I have Mr. Sen, Mr. Amit here, and then Ms. Tanu. So let's start first by introducing a little bit about yourselves, ladies first, I would say, and then we'll go through the questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tanu. I'm a partner in Khaitan & Co., which is a pan-India law firm, a full-service law firm in India. I head the technology, media, and entertainment practice at Khaitan & Co., and which is why advertising, marketing sort of becomes a specialization in terms of advisory. We generally work with different brands, mostly consumer-centric organizations, and we also help some of the regulatory bodies to pick up on policies and structure around that. So that's why I'm here. Look forward to this conversation today.
Thank you. Amit?
Hi everyone, this is Amit Khurana. I head the branding and advertising for Capgemini in India. Capgemini is a global $22 billion company. While you will know it as an IT company, we call ourselves business and technology transformation partners. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shubhajit. I run my own consulting practice in marketing called A Priori. But prior to that, that's about 3 or 4 years old. Prior to that, I've spent a lot of years in the consumer world. I used to be with GSK as the marketing head, then I was with Micromax, and then with a company called Grohe. So kind of seen the transition from classical marketing to the digital world, and now kind of waiting for AI to kill us all, I guess.
Take us all. Okay, thank you so much. Let's start this session, and let's start with the first question. We will talk about the functional and legal risks of AI in our lives. So we go Terminator mode immediately. Mr. Amit, you go first.
Okay, Terminator mode. So I was in a similar session, I think, a couple of months ago, talking about AI. How can somebody be a foolproof for AI? And I was giving this example to a youngster, saying, you give AK-47 to a soldier will protect the country. You give AK-47 to a terrorist, you know what will happen. Exactly the same for AI. We have to become foolproof against AI, believe it or not. We all have heard about Murphy's Law. A derivation of Murphy's Law is nothing is foolproof to a sufficiently talented fool. So I'll focus on how can we all be foolproof against AI in very simple terms. I'll give you some examples as well that all of you can correlate. And if you put it all together, you can even write a code of ethics for AI. And believe me, my organization has a code of ethics for AI, and I'm taking examples and clues from that. So starting with functional risks, trust and correctness. That is the first thing to watch out for. Now, Gen AI models can confidently give you wrong answers. We all know that. When you interact with ChatGPT, at the bottom, it gives you a disclaimer that don't believe me, yeah, validate. It's true. If some of you have interacted with ChatGPT, that disclaimer was not there, I think, a year ago, but it has come very recently. Inherited risk is the second point to consider. And pardon me, I'll be referring to my notes here because I think this is a very important topic, and an extempore on this may not justify me being here on the stage. So inherited risk, all these models are fed by people like us for last 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. That's how they have become intelligent. And that's how there is a risk or inherited risk. If somebody has fed in a wrong information, you will get that wrong output as well. Bias. Now, I'll give you examples of bias. Very recently, global CEO of the most loved IT company in the world had to apologize for bias in their Gen AI tool called Gemini. By the way, there's no correlation of Gemini with Capgemini. So he had to apologize.
Is it the same company?
No.
Are you trying to get away from that?
No, we work with them. So he had to apologize and say that, sorry, our model overcompensates for diversity. And you would have seen in the news that when somebody was interacting with the tool and they were creating images from, let's say, World War II era, it showed women as fighters, which is not true. Yeah, so that's bias. Another example of bias. Now, if you ask ChatGPT, who has scored most international goals in football? Can somebody tell me what will be the answer? It's a very popular sport, right?
I'm here, so
Yeah, okay,
probably
fine.
it's Cristiano.
Cristiano Ronaldo?
It's a woman, actually.
Yeah. Cristiano Ronaldo has scored 128 goals till end of 2022 as per ChatGPT. And that's the answer you get. The reality is, this woman called Christine Sinclair, the names are similar. She has scored 190 goals. Look at the difference. This is called bias. Yeah? Fourth, you'll be surprised with this one, sustainability. And just to remind all of you, we are talking about functional risks of AI. Sustainability. Now you'll say, what do you mean by sustainability? A lot of energy gets consumed while training these models. They are fed with millions or billions lines of data. The stack of storage that is required to work with them is huge. The amount of heat that's generated when you start working with these systems is tremendous. All of you have been working on laptops, right? It gets hot in 2 hours if you keep it on your lap. Imagine a system like this. So sustainability. And not only this, during operation phase also, it takes a lot of energy. So we have to start considering whether the risk that we foresee in AI systems, do they outweigh the benefits that we derive? So these are some examples of functional risks. I'll quickly go to the legal risks part of it, and we have a lawyer amongst us who will validate some part of that. Privacy. Yeah, it's very, very obvious. All these models were fed in for last 20 years with data from different sources, not really ensuring whether privacy was considered or not. So by mistake, if you query or prompt these systems, you may get information which can be considered violating of privacy by somebody. Similarly with data leakage, while talking to these systems, you may be feeding some information which is confidential for your organization, but when somebody else prompts it, they will get that, right? That's called data leakage. IP, I think it's very well understood, intellectual property, they are trained by a lot of users, and you may end up violating IP of somebody else. So I think Tanu will cover that in a little more detail. Last point, the last point on this, ethics. Now, a great example of ethics violation is deepfake. We have all heard the news about deepfakes. Now, deepfake is not bad, right? As a concept, the deepfake was developed to mimic situations, to advance the technology or to advance the output. We humans are using it in the wrong sense. Yeah? I will stop here and
Opening up a little bit more the panel. As a lawyer, right, and we were just talking about a little bit of the foundation of this technology transformation that we're going through, right? So not only the risks of AI specifically, but more as the technology development that we have seen in the last couple of years and months, actually, it's very fast to evolve. How does legally we can really approach the evolvement so fast of technology, and what is the educational elements that we need to bring to people to really understand what the technology risks are, and how can we get people more reassured to use it and to propel their lives?
Right. Great question, I think, and just maybe I'll answer this in two parts. One, I'll pick up from where Amit left. In terms of legal risks of using AI, I think one of the largest issues that we're sort of still grappling with in India and across is that laws are different, they're regional and jurisdictional in that sense. And in India, at least, we still don't recognize AI as a legal person, right? So the outcome that is generated by a AI tool, nobody still really knows who owns it, right? Is it the software maker? Is it the technology owner? Is it somebody who has engineered the prompt and inputted that prompt because of which the outcome came about? Is it the organization that has deployed the AI tool? And so on, right? So there are risks around that, and you can of course cover it contractually and negotiate that.
So you're saying it's more an IP problem itself?
It is a large IP problem, I think, and especially given how much of deployment is happening in the creative space of AI, right? I think today the creative space, marketing and advertising is, one segment of that, but, let's also say look at filmmaking, advertisements, creators, people who are writing scripts and dialogues and, those sort of things. So the amount of deployment that the creative space is seeing, and the dichotomy that, who owns that IP is still a question mark, at least in India. That, I think, is a big issue to consider. And the second layer to that is now it's also cross-border, right? Most AI tools or bigger AI tools are actually owned by offshore entities. So their laws are different than our laws, and then how is that tied down together? And tomorrow, if there is a dispute, where are you going to fight it? Can you fight it in India? Can you fight it abroad? Which lawyers are you going to use, and which court is going to decide who owns what? So I think that is a massive problem, according to me, just legally. And I feel that people who are actually on the floor using these products have no idea about that. Right.
Thank you.
So,
I do feel from our side we use technology and AI every day, and number one step of the process, just to strengthen your point, is actually using our legal team to support anything.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
the cross borders is actually a very important topic
Correct.
for all of us to be aware when we are
Correct.
using the tools, not only nationally but also across. To Mr. Sen, I want to extend a little bit the conversation. Otherwise, I feel we're gonna take over the session. I don't know if we can take over the day. Not only the legal risks again, but also how do we bring it to people?
So I've got a couple of points, just as a segue. I think we've dealt with this in some form and shape in the past, in the sense that just remember that technology will always move faster than our legal infrastructure and thinking can ever do. It's that. So we'll have to figure out, legal always kind of follows up on the technology, and I think that's what we are kind of living through right now. I'm not again too sure that it really is our job to educate every person, in the sense that technologies have come, people have over a time kind of
Embrace
adopted it
and absorb it as you go. Yeah.
I do think what you need is far stronger, far more visible regulation. I'm always a big believer in not government regulation, but industry body self-regulation. And I don't think that we are getting enough conversations about how will the industry self-regulate.
Yes.
And I think that's an area that I think we should be having a lot more visible conversations rather than what's happening. I just make one last point about this whole AI space, which is I think AI is fundamentally different from any other technology waves that we've seen earlier. We've seen some form of digital, blah, 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 blah. Because I think this is the first time we have a technology which by itself will become more intelligent than us. We are not kind of harnessing the development of this technology by investments and human thinking. What's going to happen very, very soon is AI will learn or teach itself to be way smarter than humans. And I think that's something that I don't think we've ever confronted before.
The statistic is it improves 10 times any other 6 months.
Correct.
Which is quite impressive.
And if you're in the world of AI, I think there's a huge topic in the area of what's called alignment, which is what you're teaching or what you're expecting the AI to do versus how it interprets it and therefore does something is completely different. The classic case they say is, hey, AI cure cancer, and it kills humanity because if there are no humans, there won't be any cancer. Now, that's an alignment problem, which is it is meeting the objective that you've set it.
Exactly.
But in a way that it doesn't figure out. So I think we talked a lot about the challenges of AI deployment today. Wow, this is going to be nothing compared to 3 years, 5 years, I don't know how long, down the road, because we are entering, I think, uncharted territories.
Thank you, Mr. Amit. In terms of the education element, and I know you prepared for this one as well, in terms of how do you educate people about the risks and potential of these new technologies that we are all seeing?
So allow me to tackle it in a different manner. Instead of education, which is definitely required, we all agree with that, let me throw on you a research that says potential. Yeah? And Tanu just gave a statement, being a lawyer, saying that while AI is everywhere, but she's not sure if we are all ready to make good use of it. Now, imagine if she gives this statement in front of a judge will say, give me the proof. So, if I was Tanu, this is what I will do. So I'm quoting a study which is done by Cisco. It's called Cisco AI Readiness Index. I'll repeat for the purpose of all of you who are taking notes. Cisco AI Readiness Index, published in November 2023. And they have beautifully summarized it in 3 words. The study is, I think, some 70, 80 pages. In the 3-word summary, look at this. intentions outpacing abilities. 3 words, some summary of 80-page report. What does it mean? It says, while we have all good intentions of using AI, but we don't have abilities. What does it mean? Again, quoting from the same report. And for academic knowledge, this research was done on 8,000 professionals who are related to AI across 30 markets or countries in the month of September, October 2023. So it's not very old study that I'm quoting. Now it says only 14% of global companies, 14% of global companies are prepared to fully deploy and leverage AI. 1-4. More than 50% of them think that if they do not act in next 12 months, it will impact their business, which is end of 2024. That's how seriously AI can impact your business if you really don't tame or learn to tame it now. Now you'll say, fine, this is a global thing, tell me something about India. Yeah, most of us are representing firms in India. 2 important call-outs. Number 1, as a country, India is well ahead of the world in readiness as a country. And as most of us here represent Marcom function in one way or the other, as a function, we are well ahead of others in AI readiness. I will end my deliberation here for other comments, please.
Thank you so much. I actually want to bring the readiness point to Ms. Tanu. Like, do you believe or do you feel that as a country, from a legal perspective, the readiness is there for these new technologies?
Look, I think as a larger point, it's not possible, I think, for regulations in India or anywhere in the world to be ahead of technology. It's impossible, right?
Yeah, that was Mrs. Sen pointed
Yeah,
out. It's always ahead, right?
It's not possible, right?
We're always
Because
running behind.
you're always going to be running behind, and laws are always going to be catching up with what's happening, right? Because look at the pace of AI, for example. If the subject is AI today, look at the pace at which it's learning, it's developing, the number of people who are increasingly using it, the number of people who are coming up with newer tools. So by the time a legislator or a regulator even identifies that this is the problem and, you comes up with a landscape around it, you have 10 other problems because there are 10 other products in the market, right? So it's impossible for any regulatory regime to be ahead of technology. But I think the best that we can do is increase our pace, have more conversation,
Be as ready as possible.
be as ready as possible. And I think in that context, conversations between regulators, stakeholders, developers, it needs to be a more cohesive ecosystem where nobody is battling anybody, right? Nobody is pushing regulations. Regulators are not approaching it in a way that, okay, if this is not right, I'm going to shut it down. Because then there's always going to be resistance and there's always going to be friction. I think the best that we can do is reduce that friction and understand that competition and growth should never be sort of forsaken in the interest of regulations. But I also think that there needs to be a little bit of rein around development and how it is deployed, how it is released to the world. So there needs to be overall balance in the entire ecosystem. And
Thank you so
that's what
much.
I feel.
And actually, that's a segue for the topic number 2, new ecosystems. With technology being as sophisticated, what we see today as well is what's real and what's not in the media landscape, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about the influencer dynamics. What is the influencers and how they act on a media ecosystem? So I think I will open with Mr. Sen here. How do you see this role? And I'm going to replace my question because I think we have a topic here about change agents. So it's not so much about influencers as we know them, but they are more agents of influence. And it can be real, it can be artificial, it can be technology-driven. So how do you see the role of these agents of influence in a today media ecosystem?
First of all, well, you've kind of taken away one of my points, but I'll come to that.
Sorry.
No sweat. I think if you were to just look at, let's say, the evolution of influence, what's been clear is, forget AI, what's been happening over the last 10, 15, 20 years is, let's call it a democratization of the influence pathway. If you were to go back 25 years, the only people you would trust is what we would call a credentialed expert.
Exactly.
I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm an architect. And I think over the time what's happened is partly the trust levels in them have come down, and partly you've seen online influencers, etc., go up. And that's been enabled by technology. I think what's already happening right now, and it's more in the US and China than it's probably in India, is you're already beginning to see that the big influencers are having their lunch eaten by micro-influencers. And that's being driven by the algo change which Twitter has come, because on which TikTok has brought about, because on TikTok it doesn't matter how many followers you have.
It's like everyone is a market.
Everyone's a market, right? So the algo has already changed the influence patterns in the US and China. And I think sooner or later it'll come to India. But one effect of that is it doesn't matter that now I am Kim Kardashian and I've got 20 million followers or whatever, because, and that leads to the development of micro-influencers, which AI will now make into AI-based influencers. And I think that's the trend that you can clearly going to see play out over the next couple of years. One last point in all this is that's based on the current technology platform, which is essentially a mobile phone. The other thing that's going to happen over the next 3 to 5 years is, as Apple calls it, spatial computing, and VR really takes off, and you can see that beginning to happen. I think how we generate content is going to change. Because, hey, if you're walking around with your glasses on, you don't want to suddenly have your life
It's
interrupted.
more real life, real time, exactly.
So how will influence play out in that technology platform, and that content platform is something, again, it's perhaps too early for everyone to worry about, but people who are like you, who are in the content development space, need to think about what will happen to influence and advertising and in that environment.
Yeah.
Because that's coming, 3 years, 5 years, whatever, X number of years. I don't know if that answers.
No, it does. I often say when I'm talking with clients or our colleagues or my teams, it could be a white canvas for imagination, or it can be a very Black Mirror, dystopian and intrusive Black Mirror, right? So I'll direct this point. How do we make regulations where we don't know what is real and what's not? From an influence perspective, the power of technology, of influencing people, and how do you regulate this? What is the role of legal in terms of the power of agents of influence in people?
I think some, regulatory construct around this has already sort of come about in India. At least there are, guidelines and ways in which endorsements should be done today. There are guidelines by ASCII on, how influencers should function by themselves as individuals, and, what organizations should do while they're engaging them, and so on. And, most of that, the current regulatory landscape largely is around transparency, to say that, okay, if I'm talking about a product and if it's a paid partnership, then, that needs to be disclosed. So the consumer sort of knows that, can at least draw some distinction in terms of there being a motivation around talking about a product and, genuinely talking about a product.
Some of the algorithms have like, this is like sponsored or
Correct.
artificial. Or,
correct.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so look, the platforms have these tools, right? But it is a regulatory mandate now to use those tools, right? So that's the difference, which was not there in India till a couple of years back. But it's come about now, and there are some penalties, etc., around that. So that's that. I think, in fact, the more stronger legislation, which is our Consumer Protection Act, also says that if you're endorsing a product, then you need to do your own due diligence around that product, and just don't talk about it because you're paid to it. I don't know. I think to me the challenge is enforcement more than regulations right now. Right? You can have principles and guidelines and statutory codes and penalties and all sorts of deterrents, but how effectively is that being enforced is the larger question. To that extent, I think we still have some catching up to do in India, at least, right? That's what I think. Going ahead, like Shobhajit says, law is always behind. so,
and it's also we are in an industry which is product driven, right? So it's a business that has to sell. So the role of influencers in it, has to play a selling role, I would say.
Can I just build on something that Tanu just said, because I think that's important, and it anyway was a problem will become far bigger problem, which is the one of how do we implement it, right? How do we? Which is just remember in India, frankly, this social circle is a very thin layer. And a heck of a lot of people are getting exposed to a heck of a lot of influence, which is outside, let's say, what we are measuring. And what AI or any of these automation tools are going to do is to do that at scale.
Exactly.
And that's something that I think when it comes to implementation is, how do you kind of even collect what's happening out there? Because that's not getting picked up, in these circles. Let's put it.
It's the thought process of everyone is a market, as you were mentioning. We have the ability now to scale dramatically, and I think the hyperlocalization example of Tata Tea, you can really reach to people individually. How do we make sure that we are doing in a way that is meaningful and is actually driving the product and the brand, and not just artificially influencing people?
I think one just thought to add to what Shubhajit is saying, and he's made a great point. I think in terms of enforcement and implementation, right, what happens, more on the legal and regulatory side of things is that our systems are still driven by complaints, right? So it's the initiation, therefore, is from somebody complaining as opposed to there being general monitoring, right? I think maybe there needs to be some thought about, how do we sort of transition into that where, and how many of us are really complaining? Right.
Which I think it guides into the third topic as well, which is responsible advertising. So we are talking about the power of technology.
There's something called responsible? Oh, no. Okay.
Hopefully, I try every day. Responsible advertising, and I will keep to Ms. Tanu here. Do you think, from your experience, that actually people care about ethics in advertising?
I mean, I absolutely believe that. I think today's consumers of all age groups, I think, and especially the younger ones, I think, are very, very focused on,
But is it ethics over product as well?
It is. Whether you're implementing or not is a different question. But if the question is, do they care about it? I think, yes, they do care about it. They care about purpose and impact and, transparency, pricing being ethically done, advertising being ethically done. So all of those principles, I think, people are aware about it, and I think they do care about it. But then again, the question is, the people that we are talking about here, in the Indian context, is a very small percentage of our overall demographic, right? Now, we can talk about people in India and the Gen Z and the Gen X and, multiple other gens beyond that who care about a lot of things today. But that is a very, very small subset. You go to the more rural and tier 2 cities and, more suburban population. I mean, there the struggles are more about meeting ends, right? So then, is that question really relevant to that demographic? Do they care or do they not care?
It's the point of Mr. Sen earlier about should be an industry-led regulation. So it should be an industry-led concern to making sure ethics are being applied.
So, that's where I was getting to. I think the the drive to be ethical should not be around whether the consumer cares about it or not. Is
Very good point.
where I was getting to, right? Because consumers are spaced across. They're of different demographies, different social etiquettes, different educational backgrounds, and that cannot be the driving factor to do business ethically.
Mr. Amit, I know, that's
So,
why I was about to see. Do you
self-
think is...
Self-regulation example. I'll give my own company's example. As I was explaining in my earlier deliberation, that we have something called Code of Ethics for AI. There are Code of Ethics for business as such, then there's specific for AI. And all employees, and we are more than 3 lakh employees across the world, all of us have to clear that training. So you are speaking to a trained person on using AI ethically. So that's how serious we should be. And again, example of self-regulation within the organization.
Exactly. Thank you.
And this didn't come recently. Our code of ethics was written, I think, 2.5 years ago.
Thank you so much. Mr. Sen, your point of view on the ethical advertising practices and transparency of our industry.
No, sorry, we were having that chat before we came on.
Exactly, yeah.
I have a bit of a contrarian view. Unfortunately, it's very
And
jaded.
we were saying, please have it. Let's be controversial.
And I think, let me politely put it, which is I think there is a huge, what we call, say-do gap of the consumers. In any research that you go to, consumers will say, yeah, of course ethics, of course sustainability, of course blah, blah, blah. You see the behavior completely different. I'll give you an example, and I hope that no one's from that industry or that company on stage here. But Volkswagen essentially for years fooled European consumers, blatantly lied. And that's just one of the companies. There were multiple companies. But you know what happened to their business? Nothing. People took it, they got a few fines, they got away with it. And I can keep on, you go to any Gen Z research anywhere in the world, Gen Z cares about sustainability. They also buy dramatically on Shein.
Yeah.
So what consumers say versus
What
what
they
they
do.
do is completely different. Back to Tanu's point. Therefore, it's a bit like sustainability. People say, hey, we want
the
sustainability.
greenwashing conversation.
But no one will want to spend 5 paisa extra for a more sustainable product. We know that. So effectively, if you want to bring changes in ethics and sustainability, this has to be where the brands and the companies take the lead or industries take the lead and say, you know what, we're going to raise the floor. We are not going to do this kind of advertising. We're not going to make these kind of products. We raise the floor and we stop anybody else who's not following or complying with that. Because I don't think it's going to come from the consumers.
Thank you so much, which is an amazing segue to the last question, which will be all a bit about purpose, right? Be meaningful about what we do, and as companies being meaningful about it. So before I give the word to the panel, just remembering, we are talking about the ethics in the digital age, navigating the digital age are dark patterns, the old Black Mirror. We talked about how can we educate people about new technologies and how the change influencers can have an impact in people's lives. And we will finish this topic, and I think Mr. Stan gave a great segue to what's the role of purpose to create this positive, hopefully, impact in people's lives. Mr. Amit.
Thanks. Mr. Das gave an example of how Tata Tea Premium has always been a purpose-led brand, and beautifully so. Thank you for that great example.
Thank you.
Now, let's get into what does it take to write that purpose. Yeah, it's a one-line purpose, probably a couple of lines, and we all have read so many purpose statements of different companies. Have you ever wondered what does it take to write that brand purpose for a global organization of any stature? I'll quote a purpose of an organization here, and it reads like this: unleashing human energy through technology for an inclusive and sustainable future. I'll repeat: unleashing human energy for a sustainable, through technology for a sustainable and inclusive future. Now you'll notice it starts with human energy, all of us present here. Yeah? And then it says, how can it build future? The future which is sustainable, the future which is inclusive for their clients and partners, for their own employees, and for the society we live in. Yeah? And from this purpose, they derived their, tagline, get the future you want. Now this is a promise to their clients and partners, employees, and the society we live in, that we are with you and we'll create this future with you. Now what does it take to write this? To arrive at this purpose statement, the company spoke to 50,000 employees over 6 months through a questionnaire. And they were the first ones to go to. Obviously, they spoke to clients, partners, NGOs, shareholders as well. The heart of it was with employees. 50,000 responses and 35,000 comments were analyzed. And they were asked for different versions of the purpose statement before they finalized it. As on today, that has become a fundamental for that organization to work with and is a compass for all employees to act and behave. Yeah? So that's how seriously purpose statements are written for an organization. Now, if one of you wants to know which company I'm talking about, it's my own organization, Capgemini. Thank you very much. I will end my presentation here.
Thank you. Ms. Tanu, the role of purpose, knowing that the foundation needs to be one that is regulated, that is one that needs to be meaningful for people. What do you believe from your legal perspective would be the purpose to create this positive impact in culture?
You know, I'm going to try and answer this as a consumer than a lawyer at this point.
Please do.
You know, I just think I'm obviously not a creative or a marketing expert, right? But I work with creative people in an advisory role. But keeping that role aside, I feel that, you know, you can sell a product based on need, but you can connect with a brand basis purpose, right? So there can be 10 products, and, you know, let's take Puneet's example. You know, there are 20 different brands of tea in India, which is a household item, grocery item, right? Nobody can do without it. But there is Tata Tea, which is Desh Ki Chai, right? So now if that strikes, it strikes. So I think the point that I'm making is that if you were to create visibility and a larger connect for a brand in people's mind, then, you know, that's where the purpose becomes sort of foundational. And given how our generation, the younger generation also is, I think everything that is more, brands that are more impact driven or sustainability driven, or, you know, have a thought behind just selling a product, I feel, you know, they sort of end up becoming larger brands and more sustainable, longer sustainable brands. So, you know, I look at purpose with that lens.
Thank you. I normally say, if we are having a session and there is a lawyer in the room, we must be doing something right. Because we are challenging something and we are challenging a status quo, so we need to check with the lawyers what we are doing. So thank you for their perspective. Mr. Sen, from your perspective, what's the role of purpose in our lives and in this industry?
I'm going to break it down into maybe two different spaces.
Please do.
Sometimes I think the whole discourse around purpose has been taken over and it's become a bit of faff. And I think let's leave that aside, because you can see some of that now going back and saying purpose of a company is to make money, kind of stuff.
I'll
So-
make a point after yours
No, no,
about
but-
purpose. Go for it.
So I'm not talking about that purpose. I do think that perhaps even more than purpose, an external purpose, and I think companies should have really well-defined values. And if you can hold on to your values and use your values to take the right decisions, even if you don't have a very high-level purpose, I think that's good enough. And I think even if we can get to that, I think that's fantastic. I think the role of purpose is, though nuanced and good, which is, I think, what's happening in today's world, thanks to social media, thanks to everything else, is we're beginning to live very atomized, lonely lives. And I think our consumers do want to feel like they want to be part of something bigger. I mean, the reason why Taylor Swift is so big is because it's a shared moment, it's a shared experience for a lot of people at the same time, and we are missing that with the death of linear TV, etc. We're missing that. And I think brands can create that sense of something big that we are all part of. I mean, Tata Tea is a perfect example. Today, what you've done and where you've evolved from, which is Jaagte Raho, there was a purpose, right? And that was linked to the brand, to the category. It was brilliant. So that whole transition from there to now, Desh Ki Chai, I think if you can get consumers to feel that you're part of something much bigger, I think there's genuine merit in that.
Thank you so much. I'll finish by saying, and quoting Mr. Ahmed, I would feel purpose is a promise. It's a promise that you have and a commitment that you have for others. I'll finish by thanking my panelists, fellow colleagues, and also to share my own personal purpose, which is bringing creativity back to the boardroom. So I think I'm feeling my purpose by being here today with you. Thank you so much for attending, and a very loaded topic, but I hope you get something positive to your lives and to your organizations with this panel. And for me, it's been a pleasure to be here as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very thought-provoking session. Can we have a louder round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you so much. Please come together for a group photograph. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.